Welcome, everyone, to the third in a series of conversations regarding STEM education. Again, with me today is Jody Goff.
Hi.
And in this series, or this episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about the STEM spaces, for the lack of a better term. We didn't touch on that too much last time. We're going to get into that. And we're also going to talk a little bit about how STEM is facilitated with remote learners. So, Jody, let's start with the spaces. We've got STEM labs, we've got fabrication labs, and we have maker spaces.
Right.
And how do we
And then your
differentiate?
traditional science labs.
Well, yeah.
Right, with the black countertops.
Right. Yeah, which I'm familiar with from my days.
Right, and they're still out there.
Sure.
And they're a good thing.
Yep. Well, I gotta believe when you're looking at things like having gas and all those things that have to be put into a space like that those are probably long-term investments. They don't change much over the years.
Right, which we do that with Duell, and we are still updating those spaces because it's still a need, and that's one thing when we transition into another approach or pedagogy. Sometimes we accidentally push aside the old as if it is the old and not good anymore.
Not valued anymore.
Right,
exactly.
Which isn't necessarily true, and that leads to what your objective is with your STEM lab, because you mentioned STEM labs, makerspace, Fab Labs.
Right.
So Fab Labs would have more of the equipment, your mold injections, 3D printers, precision measuring tools,
Right.
saws, and I've seen several of those. And then you have more of the makerspace, tinkering items, and then your STEM lab might be a combination.
Right.
Of them. But I think it takes us back to our objective, and it made me think of a few years back when my 10-year-old was wanting to go to the apple orchard, and she kept saying, "When are we going to the apple orchard? When?" And it must have been a busy time.
Right.
And I said, "Well, what exactly is your objective in
Wait,
going?"
before you go further, I have a prop.
Oh, you do? You have an apple?
I do.
I needed a prop this time
You're
because I
right.
didn't bring one. So yeah, that's what I asked her. What's your objective? Is it to get organic apples? Is it for those yummy homemade donuts? Are we getting a pumpkin, a petting zoo?
Sure.
What's your objective? And she's looking at me like, and she said, just because we go to the apple orchard every year.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay, tradition.
Right.
So that's what I can figure out. I can see which apple orchard we're going to go to because
Sure.
there are several choices.
Yep.
So I had to know, well, what is it that we want to gain from it? So I think that many districts have different visions of what they want in their STEM spaces. But I think the key is to make sure that there's a space for collaboration. That students, the space is conducive to students interacting with each other,
Right.
sharing ideas, experimenting, like storage, how accessible are the materials that they need. So I think how you set up the mood of the space, I guess. Like for instance, when in your house, where do most of the conversations occur? Like, where do people typically congregate? Like, if you have your kids when during time, when, your
Right.
kids are gone now, right? Grown.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
so during that time, or you have visitors, think of where everyone usually congregates.
Well, in our house, it's usually in the kitchen or around the kitchen.
Okay. And that's what most people say.
Yep.
So the survey says it's in the kitchen.
Right.
And it's even in the kitchen if you're not eating.
So why don't we have home ec anymore?
Right. We're all in the kitchen. I think we need to bring that back
I do too.
because I would love to know how to sew a button on. That goes to my
Right.
husband
Yeah,
because he
right.
learned it in the military.
Oh, there, see?
Yeah.
Great.
And I would love to just be able to sew on, sew a button.
Right.
But yes, that's how it is in my household as well. Even if we're not eating, everybody seems to congregate in the kitchen. And I'm not sure exactly why that is, but I do know that the feel of the kitchen and the way that it is, that's where the conversations occur. And so we want our STEM spaces to be conducive for kids exploring, answering questions, and whatnot.
Feeling comfortable.
Feeling comfortable.
Enough to have that collaboration going on, the
Right.
exchange of ideas. Great.
That's the great, a great, the best change that I have seen in education is just the rearrangement of classrooms and flexible seating. What I mean by flexible seating is mobile is good, yes, but even giving kids the opportunity to stand if they need to.
Right.
I notice in many STEM labs, most tables are at standing counter height. So, which makes sense because, like when I was trying to do the trash can, it was
Right.
really difficult to do
Wasn't that
sitting
easy
down.
standing up.
So creating spaces like that. I have this quote from Albert Einstein that I absolutely love, and he says he does not teach his pupils, but rather creates the conditions for them to learn in. And I think that ties in nicely with STEM and STEM spaces. And then going back to, I'm kind of circling back to the fabrication labs. We talked a little bit about some of the equipment that you would have in there. And then the maker spaces, more of the tinker toys. Like I have this little Ozobot, tiny
yeah.
robot that functions on color coding. And we have some AR or VR and AR tools. So I think providing kids with various tools to be able to explore with, and then construction materials.
Right.
Like for me, I just wanted some cardboard, wood pieces, thermometers, good scales.
Right.
And so one thing that I did was connected with businesses in the area.
Yeah.
And that's another aspect of STEM that we didn't really touch on, is getting connected with local businesses and
Well,
calling them in.
I wondered about that in a couple of different levels because, when I was young and going through the process or going through education, we had vocational labs or vocational training.
Yeah.
It sounds like that was a little different, but also sounds like we've come a little full circle, and that's part of that.
Right. So what is that? Because I remember hearing that as well.
Well, it was basically an opportunity for you to, like, you could get into woodworking, you could get into auto mechanics, things like that, so that when you left school, you could actually get employed. You could leave with a
Some sort of
Correct.
certification,
Yeah,
right?
right, yeah.
And they are still doing that a little bit with like the middle colleges. I think is a term that I've heard at the district that I worked at. Kids could go to a community college and gain
Right.
some a trade skill
Yeah.
of some sort.
Well, and a lot of the rural districts have the Future Farmers of America. I don't know if that's still in play anymore out there, but it was, with all the green initiatives that we have,
Right.
you'd think that would be a program that would just be growing,
Right.
but I'm not sure if it is or not anymore.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
But I'm not even sure that fits really into the STEM concept.
Right.
It's kind of different, but
Which it is preparing kids for postgraduate STEM-related careers.
right.
Farming would go in that category.
Definitely.
There's a lot of engineering that is at play in farming, which I don't know. I get farm fresh eggs. Like those are the only eggs I will ever eat. But that's as far as as much as I know about being a farmer. Well, actually, we had a pet rabbit, and he is a mess, and I had to use hay for it. So that was a little bit in the area of farming. But yes, back to the actual STEM spaces and where STEM takes place. It's amazing what some districts have invested in and what their STEM labs look like, because although I say, the kitchen seems to be where people congregate, and you would think that the dining room or the living room was more of a more conducive environment for visiting, but people prefer to, stand up and hang out in there. And although I say STEM can take place anywhere, it is critical to have tools for students materials for them to be able to explore and do their work with. And my company as well with other companies are really helping districts with designers develop these spaces that are great for STEM learning.
Excellent.
So do you think you would prefer a STEM lab, a makerspace, or a Fab Lab?
That's a good question. I think I would probably go for the Fab Lab.
Okay.
That would be my I can't say area of expertise, but I would probably find something more passionate there than I would in some of the
with the saw and the
right
3D printer.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I would probably scoot toward the more of the artsy side, the maker space.
Exactly.
And tinkering, so I could build things and make something pretty.
Right.
But you could, I guess, in the Fab Lab, you could probably.
Could, but that wouldn't be my first goal. Would not be to make something pretty.
Right.
But something functional.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Solving having a solution to a real world problem.
Right.
You would be right in there.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about spaces. What do you do with remote learners then? I mean, it's not like everybody's got a maker space or STEM lab in their home. How do we make that accessible for them?
Well, when I was, I did do some curriculum for remote learners, and we would try to keep our projects to home, materials that you would find at home.
Okay.
Paper plates, but then again, like I say, you have, because this is inquiry driven and students coming up with multiple solutions, it is rather a challenge because you're more of guiding students through this process of thinking.
Right.
And so it has to be facilitated and guided throughout the process, or so from my perspective would be something that is real hands-on with someone else. So if a child is doing it in isolation, I think it becomes more of the traditional science experiment that they're doing. But at the same time, a very skilled, teacher or district could probably help guide those students with the driving questions and lay things out for them in their exploration. And there are so many technology tools. So when we did a project on waves in energy, we used Google Journal, which could measure sound waves and had various tools built into one. And so if you have technology tools that you can introduce children to just from their Chromebooks or whatever home devices they're using, you probably could direct a decent STEM activity.
Right. Great.
But it goes back to that beginning of what is STEM.
Right.
Because I've seen activities where they take the Oreos, and make the phases of the moon, and that's actually categorized under a STEM activity on some web pages or curriculum. And I wouldn't. It is model building. It's part of what you would do, part of the process probably. But
and I could definitely get into the Oreo
Me too.
process. So,
Or the marshmallow tower building.
Exactly.
I always,
Yeah.
every time we do that, I would use colored marshmallows.
Right.
Do you like the ones that are fruity?
Yeah, well, I'm not a big marshmallow person to begin with. They're just kind of mushy.
Yeah.
But Oreos, that's a whole nother. Yeah, see, and
Thin or double stuff?
oh, gotta be double stuff. Not the thin, not the thin. It's like a cracker. Well, all right. So we've talked today, and we've gone a little bit long, but it's certainly a great topic. What the spaces look like.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with somebody that can't actually make it to the space?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting just to, in my mind, to think about how schools have really evolved that and the trials and tribulations associated with turning that around.
Right.
Got to be difficult.
Yeah. It's a difficult subject, I think, to simulate
Yeah.
in
yeah,
another
exactly.
environment,
Yeah.
only because of the hands-on nature of it and the facilitation and the collaboration.
Right.
You know, that it's not very well done in isolation, but I've seen some creative solutions out there, and it's
Sure.
fascinating.
Well, I think another topic that we need to explore, and this will be for another episode, is assessment.
Mm-hmm.
How do we deal with that in a STEM environment where it is a little bit more chaotic?
Yeah,
So.
that's a good question. Do you have another guest to?
No, but that might just be a free-for-all. We'll just discuss it.
Yeah, we might see if we can try to come up with a solution for that
Yeah, exactly.
right here.
Yeah, it might be needed. Great. Well, thank you again for today, and thanks for these series, and I look forward to doing some more with you.
Fantastic, me too.
And thank you for tuning in today. Again, feel free to subscribe below, and if you have any comments, feel free to do so. We may pop some links in there if you're interested to look at some STEM information. So look for that. And again, thank you very much. I'm John Foster,
Jody Goff.
and this series has been sponsored by Convergent Technology Partners. Thank you.
Thank you.